So we have staff available to you. Remind staff that the green button on is when you want to speak, and off is red. We have, if anybody, I think everybody is plugged into the malt box. And we will go down the line now and let folks say their name. Maybe the trustees can give context to where your district is in physical location, and introductions of titles from our other staff panelists.
So my name is Amber Ellens. I currently serve the board as their secretary. And my elected district is District 5, which is generally the Austin High feeder pattern schools. Just so everyone knows, we have the fewest number of schools in my area. So just to put that in context.
Cindy Anderson, currently serving as Vice President of the board. I'm also place 8, which is an at-large position, meaning I don't have a specific geographical district. I have all of AISD.
Geronimo Rodriguez, I serve as the District 6 trustee in South Austin, and I serve my board colleagues as the president of the Austin Independent School District Board of Trustees.
Paul Cruz, Superintendent.
Lisa Goodnow, Associate Superintendent for Academics and Social and Emotional Learning.
Nicole Conley, Chief of Business and Operations.
Matias Segura, Operations Officer.
So we'll hear two opening statements from the president of the board and the superintendent, and we'll start with Mr. Rodriguez.
Good afternoon. You know, the school changes are part of our journey about ensuring every Austin child gets a good education and that every Austin school is a good school. And this is about equity and opportunity and overcoming a long history of inequities. This community 2 years ago supported a $1 billion bond package to reinvent the urban school experience with new modernized schools. In June of this year, this board voted to support the largest pay increase for our teachers and all of our staff, double what the minimum that the state legislature had required. And now we're looking at equity in our academic programs. And I think that's the next step as we accept the recommendations from the superintendent and administration. And that'll be over the next 3 months, a discussion, a dialogue around these issues. And we look forward to having that dialogue with our colleagues on the board. And I want to turn it over to Dr. Cruz to talk about specifics on the school changes.
Thank you, President Rodriguez. I do want to thank the board members, our board officers who are here, and all board members to set that direction and leadership about being bold, about addressing systemic inequities that have existed over time. People have been asking, where's the plan? Where are the options? Where's the plan? Well, here's the plan and here are the options. It's not yet at a recommendation. Right now is a time for dialogue, discourse, but we need to have something to respond to. Absolutely we do. This is still about access and opportunity for all Austin's children. It's all of them. All means all. We're going to stay true to that. There are issues that we need to address. Pleased with the successes that we've had, but we know we all need to do more. And this plan proposes some changes, proposes some options for us to consider. Now's the time for dialogue and discourse, but here's the plan. It's also important to recognize that change is hard. We all get that. Also, I can assure you, the board, my team, who I commend for working so hard on this plan, we're all trying to do the right thing. I understand change is hard. We're all doing the right thing for all of our students. It's very complex. It's very involved. But I welcome the dialogue and the discourse to make sure we're coming together as Austin's community, as Austin's district, for all of Austin's students. And so for that, I do commend our leadership team, our board, to staying focused on the vision around access and opportunity for all Austin's children. I know one other thing. We can't look away. The option can't be status quo. The option cannot be business as usual. That's not the option. We have to look at the changing context. We have to look at changing learning standards and expectations for students, face it head on, and then address it, and plan for those improvements. That's extremely important. Something that the board said and that the leadership team was very true is lead with the student outcome. What is this going to do for students? What is the outcome for Austin's students? So when you look at the plan where there are systemic issues around cultural proficiency for all individuals with the school district, from the board to all staff members. Why is that important? Why is that important? What does that have to do with students? We have to recognize the talents and the genius that every youngster brings to the table. That's why that one's important. There's another item in there around affordability, that options, we know we are dealing with affordability within Austin. Teachers wanted to live in the Austin community, so having a space available for that really is one response to that need. There are several proposals, several options that we want to consider, but we welcome the dialogue so that we can engage in a discourse around the future of Austin. We want to make sure that we are addressing issues that we said we need to address. It's not perfect. It wasn't intended to be perfect, but it's real. It's in front of us, and we engage in that dialogue with our community. It's also important to note a couple of things with this is we're going to need some space. We're going to need some space and some time. There's no vote before this board. It's not going to be for vote until November. That's sticking to our proposed schedule so that there's ample opportunity for responsiveness, to listen and learn. How do these items address the specific issues in the Austin community, and how do they not? And what are the other factors in the school system that we have to make sure that we leverage to make the best, provide the best learning opportunities for all of our students? Also, just the final thing, that it is not final. It's not done. We all said we're going to bring this out for discussion, for dialogue. That's exactly where we are at this point. And so with that, we'll open it up to any conversation or questions that you may have, and I believe Renee will facilitate the conversation.
Sure. So as we have folks in the malt box, we're going to ask you to ask your question in the mic. Christina's going to be making her way around. We'll start over here with Community Impact and Nick, and we'll be sure to get everybody in. Also, for those that are needing a Spanish bite, we will accommodate that after our discussion.
Thank you. Nick Sicali, Community Impact Newspaper. Hi. My first question is, this conversation kind of gathered steam last fall when we were looking at a budget deficit and kind of how possibly closing schools and changing programs could save the district money over time. Do we have an estimate of what these proposals, if all approved, currently written, would save the district and how that would affect the budgets in the future?
I'm going to ask Ms. Colling to respond to that, but let me just add a little part to that. It wasn't about cuts necessarily only. It was about reinvestments. So when the board approved the budget with around $30 million of cuts, all those weren't cuts. It was about reinvestment, and that reinvestment was in our staff pay that Geronimo Rodriguez just alluded to, early literacy, and supporting campuses most in need. So part of it was about cuts. The bigger part was about how and where do we make reinvestments in making sure that all students excel. But Nicole?
Hi. So, I mean, when we look at sort of the cumulative sort of possible realignments that we can make and also save in terms of taxpayer resources, we're looking at about $220 million worth of savings in deferred maintenance through some of these merging efforts or blending efforts with our communities. And then on the operational side, we're looking at about a $10 million that we can reallocate towards advancing some of these conversations with our communities. We know that we're going to have to reinvest these resources as a bridge to support some of the programming that we have on the table, as well as sort of to support some of the transition planning that will have to occur when our communities begin these dialogue. So we're not necessarily looking at this as a way to sort of solve bottom line gaps. We had a fairly hopeful and sort of progressive session in this last legislative actions, but we're nowhere near where we're not sort of flush, right? We know that the overall economy, we can anticipate some tightening, some possible recessions, and we don't know what's going to happen in the next legislative session. But what we're finding is that we're spread so deep, we're spread so thin, that we don't have the kind of resources to really deepen and enhance the programs that many of our students need to address some of our inequities. And so in order to build capacity or resource capacity to do the kind of work that we want to do to strengthen our academic offerings, we kind of have to do this. It's a reallocation, or it's a reinvestment in a different way. Right now, a lot of these investments go into overhead and building costs. It doesn't add to the value of the school experience. And so what we really want to do is sort of spend our money in a smart way that delivers more for our students. And so this is not necessarily a bottom line exercise. This is really about reinvesting in the right way, and so that our students can get some meaningful support and resources as a result of these reallocations. Because right now, many of our schools, even though they operate at high per pupil dollars, when you look at it across our system, they don't feel very rich because the money isn't going into the programmatic efforts that sort of make a difference for our students.
Okay, and we're going to try and get around so that you each get at least one question before we run out of time. You didn't know that, so I'm going to let you ask one more if you have one, and then we'll go to your
Sure.
left.
One more question then. Throughout the scenarios, there were a number of them. I'm just looking for clarity on this. There were a number of scenarios, specifically like Wooten transitioning to a fine arts academy. Kasurik had its own kind of individual program. Burnett was a global language school listed. There were some green tech schools in South Austin. In terms of how those scenarios work, I'm wondering logistically, are those full-time 100% academies now, and that's the main programming that we'll offer, and all students that go into them are part of that program? Or are they programs as part of a larger school? Will parents have options to possibly send their kids elsewhere if they don't necessarily like the fine arts or maybe the green initiatives that are offered at that elementary in particular?
I'm going to begin with that. I'm going to turn that over to Dr. Goodnow, who can also address on this one. It really isn't very individualized. As you can tell, just by the number of scenarios, it's not a one-size-fits-all. That's just like everybody gets the same thing. That's not equity. Achievement and excellence should be at a high level, but the program pieces are really individualized to the need of that particular community. So they're all going to be a little bit different. It is in elementary schools to provide that student experience. That's important. So where middle school and high school might be a little bit more specialized under STEM or fine arts or so forth, or the performing arts, in elementary it's much more about the experience, whether that's in the PYP program, primary years program, which leads into the IB, International Baccalaureate program, or fine arts, or STEM, or leadership, or social justice. It really is that opportunity to excel, but to have these experiences. I will say also that the scenarios, while there are several, the initial ones are all around systemic changes. A teacherage, so teacher housing is one of them. Another is around cultural proficiency training for everybody in the school system. That's an essential one. Having multicultural studies at all of our middle schools and all of our high schools. Having that opportunity for students to experience that coursework, those expectations, and of course the literature. Then there's going to be very individualized. Those pretty much fall into four major categories. One is around equity and social justice. The other is around STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Another one then falls into fine arts. We know that that one is extremely important. So those are some of the categories where, even though they're all very individualized, they sort of collapse into those four big areas around student learning. But it is that student experience. Dr. Goodnow?
Dr. Cruz said it all in many, many beautiful ways that I'll address just a couple of the specifics. So some of the scenarios that are specific to a school, Wooten, for example, has been, and I think was the first one not captured in the last bond. And so when we look at the state of the facility, we know we want to address really the building itself. And then also listening to our community and understanding that in that particular neighborhood, we wanted to be able to give our students who attend Wooten an opportunity to develop their gifts and talents so that they can be competitive as they enter into our Fine Arts Academy programs at the middle and high school, which are performance-based and audition-based to get into. So we want to provide opportunities for all of our students to be competitive, in the academic settings and fine art settings that may be more audition based when we start pursuing that. Again, and we did hear in the South that we wanted access to fine arts and fine arts academies at 9 through 12. We have Covington Middle School that is a fine arts academy, and an opportunity to imagine Covington Middle School as a performing arts academy that also has the specific strand, really, which is IB fine arts, and then offer the option for students to pursue that in grades 9 through 12. So in some of the more specialized programs, you might see that in middle and high school, if a student's really committed to that, they may not have the full option. They can still pursue a good fine arts program, whether that be at Crockett or at Bowie or Aikens. I'm very proud of our fine arts across the district. We want to increase that and then attend to some of the more specialized needs.
Delia, CBS Austin.
Hey, Superintendent Cruz, you said change is hard. Does that mean you anticipate in the short term during consolidation that more families will leave AISD? Do you think that this will have an impact on the population?
Well, we're hoping that we have more kids come into our schools because of these wonderful opportunities, access and opportunity for more of our students. It's something that we've heard over time. We've actually seen the benefit on specifically one of the items. That's one of the areas of where all these big areas fall into. One is around STEM, equity, social justice, fine arts. The other one is dual language. We've seen when our schools have moved into one-way dual language, two-way dual language, or multiple, they've seen strong gains in enrollment. So I'm actually seeing that, and our expectation is that with more information about our programming, more families, more students will stay with us and will serve our students well, but we'll have more students come into our school system. But it is going to take communicating to individuals about our school district. It is a very large district. Schools are very individualized in programming because we want to make sure to serve the needs of every individual community.
All right. Bridget, are you okay, or do you have one? Okay. Tom?
Hi. Of the 12 schools that are scheduled to, or are proposed as possible closures, 6 of them are on Austin's east side. I was wondering, with that in mind, how you explain to parents that this fits in with the equity plan for the district. And then I have another after that.
Absolutely. So I'll start off on that one, and I'll just open it up because I can always assign them, but mine would be Dr. Goodnow, but I don't know if also a board member wants to address that because that's been an important conversation at the board level as well. What we're looking at is what are the academic programs? What's being added into that design? Are we building on student strengths? So with a student who speaks a language other than English, how can we make sure students build on language experience and their native language, but also learn English? So it's around building on strengths that individuals bring to the table. The impact of that is just like you said, the consolidations. But with that then, it's sort of like a double down effect. Double down on making sure academics, we're serving our students with strong academic programs. And then when there's a school that comes available for another community need, is having a conversation with that specific community and seeing how else can we use this particular site. Is it around housing and affordability? Is it around community centers? Is it about recreational space? But it's at least about posing the question, what do we need? What can be? So that the schools and students get the strong academic foundation. Another school in the community then can serve a different purpose to serve another student need. Let me ask now if a board member would like to also address that.
You know, thank you, Dr. Cruz. I think one of the things that I appreciate about Dr. Cruz and the administration is that they are leading change, they're managing the change, they're not letting it happen to us. And what's really important about the equity question is, are we going to sit back and have a mindset of scarcity, meaning this is all we have, or are we gonna have a mindset of abundance? And I think these school changes, which are leading by example around academic programs, are a way of managing that change, of addressing that change. You know, and I gotta say, the question about equity is personal from my perspective. There are people in this room that look like me, and we were the exceptions to the rule growing up. I believe that if we are focused on academic programs that are focused on student achievement, student success, that kids like me growing up are the rule and not the exception. And I think that's really important in the mindset of where these proposals are coming. And I look forward to having our colleagues have that discussion, that dialogue between ourselves and with our community about what we really mean by equity and about student achievement, because we want good schools in every part of this community. And we have to acknowledge that has historically not been the case. And if we don't acknowledge the past and what's happened, there is no way we're going to be able to co-create the world that we want our kids to live in and be prepared for. No.
Rebecca, do you have one with KVUE?
I do. So the 2017 bond was passed, and we went to get video of some of these schools, and outside there's promises for the schools that may be closed outside of these schools. And so people voted on this bond to make this happen, but then why is Austin ISD considering closing these schools?
Matias Segura, Operations Officer. So when we went through the process of evaluating how we could best support all of our students, we certainly were mindful of the 2017 bond program. And one of the things that we recognize is that, you know, if a school is going to close and is accepted by the board as part of this process, those funds would be put into contingency and be presented back to the board, and those dollars could follow the students. You know, we certainly recognize that an improvement and a commitment to improve the facility is very, very important, but we also recognize that, you know, the dollars should follow the students. And so when you see these dollars, which we do represent in the scenarios, whether it's 500,000, 2 million, our recommendation is ultimately going to be from administration is that that goes back and reinvested back into the receiving school or to support nearby campuses as well.
Spectrum, looks like you're ready for game day, and Dr. Cruz as well. But do you have a question? Oh, I'm sorry. Nicole, did you want to add to that?
I just wanted to clarify, the savings on deferred maintenance is $240 million. So that's actually, when I calculate a rough estimate, that's over almost 9 cents on a tax rate that's back into the pockets of the voters, or the voters get to decide how they want to reinvest those dollars down the road when we have a new bond program. And that's pretty sizable. That's almost $350 on an average tax bill. So the whole intent is to do better for kids, but at the same time not necessarily overbuild, and which comes at a cost for taxpayers. And many of our taxpayers are already vulnerable to an ever-increasing property tax rate. So we have to find that balance and making sure that we do just enough to make sure that we, you know, carry out our mission for all students, but also being fiscally responsible.
I want to just add to what Nicole just mentioned and Matias, that keep in mind the initial facility master plan, 25-year facility master plan. Nothing's being done here in onesies. You know, it's not just a 1 year or 2 year. This is long term. Identified $4 billion of need. We took a very different approach. Let's build modernized 21st century schools. The patch-up job had served its time, served its purpose. We weren't going to take that route. We knew it was going to come in with great opportunities and also some challenges. But we at least have to pose the question. So I just want to highlight that part, because it isn't like the facility master plan has been completed. It was approved. We did a first phase, which was that bond, but there's still more. And our students are in our schools right now. We at least have to pose the question. How are we going to address it now? What do we know today that we didn't know a few years ago when it was being developed or approved?
My question is, with reading the proposal and reading about all the inequities that have been in the Austin School District for decades, why do you think it took so long to address this issue?
I'll start off and then open it up to anybody else as well. Our approach in Austin has been dealing with the whole child. So certainly with our academic outcomes, but as you can tell in our proposals, it's also about mental health centers. How do we address the complete needs of a student? The academic needs, but the social, emotional needs as well. And I think that's important, because I think that is something that we've realized, hearing from our teachers, our families, our students, that that's a need that we need to address. And it's about building on that. From these efforts, it's been now that we have mental health centers at several of our elementary schools, middle schools, and all of our high schools. But it's as needs change, as expectations change, we're being responsive to it. And then, of course, reinvesting our resources and also making sure that we're being responsive to the needs that are coming forward. Again, there's more work to be done. I don't think it ever ends. I don't think we ever say, great, we've called it a day, we're all good. That's not going to happen. But it is important in an organization as a system like the Austin School District to realize those successes, but then realize where we are not serving our students in the best way and make sure that we are addressing it. It's going to be a continuous process, and I see it's always important for us to always focus on students and what are the needs today and in the future.
I'd like to add a couple things just because I want to make sure that what you're hearing is that this has been a work in progress for quite a while. So I want to credit a lot of our previous trustees who really started this work before us and started laying the foundation to get us to this point today. So when you ask how come it just took so long, this is big work. And we are trying to change decades and decades of inequities. So these previous trustees, with some of the language you'll hear with mindset of abundance, that's come directly from previous trustees. The work with the facility master plan that's been 5 years in the making. That really actually started possibly a decade before that, and we learned and we learned and we learned each time. So what you're finding happening right now is a board that over time has really set the expectation for strategic thinking and strategic work around our students, and then that is now coming to fruition in all of the things you heard from President Rodriguez about the 3 areas that we focused, and the first being the bond with our facilities, the second being our teachers and our employees, and now we're really being able to figure out what we have now in hand to just dive straight into the academics.
I'd like to add something on that just briefly as well. One of the biggest shifts I think in our culture as an organization is that we're shifting away from prioritizing the buildings, and as Dr. Cruz mentioned, what used to be sort of referred to as the Band-Aid improvements. You know, previous bonds did not have modernization projects, and yet there is a considerable financial burden of carrying buildings with an average age of almost 50 years. Buildings that were built decades ago when we weren't teaching the things that we're teaching today, that don't really best accommodate the things that we want to teach for our kids tomorrow. And so that shift in the culture is about prioritizing kids over buildings. It's reinvesting the dollars that would have been spent to redo a roof, to replace an HVAC system, and invest them directly into the classroom and into our kids. That will lead to better academic outcomes for all of our kids.
Okay, Mr. Samuel, I hear you have a question.
Yes, sir. I'm Samuel Yamte with the AFTV5. It's a community television. And my question is, beyond this press conference, do you have any other way of communicating the work that you are doing here to the real community there? You know, that's my question. We're talking about the equity because the people that are affected by the equities, most of the time, are not aware of the information on the work like this. So I'm asking, is there any other, you know, idea, project that you have in mind to communicate what you are doing there?
Absolutely. So we already have we're developing a schedule of meetings that we're going to have out at our schools and our communities to listen directly from our parents, our different constituencies. So absolutely, that's already being planned, and we hope to then present that so we can see the dates and the times that are available. I'll also say that several individuals have reached out to us. They want to know more, want to know the why. Why is this the best solution for this area? I welcome that conversation. Several folks have reached out, so we're also going to do smaller sessions with individuals within our communities to make sure that we are coming from the understanding of the why. Why are we doing this? What is the need? And also, what's the best way to address it? Like I said, it's a plan. These are options. It's not perfect, but I don't know that it ever will be perfect because every day things change. It's a large organization and student needs are going to change. So it'll be both. We'll have planned times for a community, so I really appreciate the question. But it'll also be as individuals reach out to different constituencies, different community groups, we welcome that dialogue because that's what this opportunity is for. That's why the board didn't schedule a vote within 3 days. The vote is scheduled in November, so there's ample time for discussion. And keep in mind, this started sort of begins with the development of the facility master plan. And it's still around access and opportunity, trying to get as many kids as we can into the best learning spaces as fast as we can. And as Trustee Anderson mentioned, it's not just about the facility. It's about what goes on inside the facility. That's why when folks have said, cultural proficiency, what does that have to do with the facility? When we look at teaching practices and pedagogy and fine arts, all that's about what's going to go on in the facility, and it's got to be both. I do believe that better learning spaces are better for our students, and we prioritize many of our communities that were most in need. We absolutely did, and we did that. But it's also important to look at what's going on in the campus, what's going on in the school, the interactions among teachers and students and parents, and that we're responsive to make sure that all of our kids have a great learning experience.
I want to add just one thing to that. One of the other things that we're doing is we're partnering with other elected officials and community leaders that are hosting other conversations in the upcoming weeks and months, and are essentially collaborating in order to provide answers to questions, and essentially we share a lot of constituents. And so, we've intentionally reached out to them, they've intentionally reached out to us, and that's something that you also always haven't seen in politics in Austin. Everybody has a tendency to kind of stay in their own lane unless they need something, but we've intentionally developed a very strong working relationship with our county commissioners, our city council members, our mayor, our legislators, and have really, I think, kind of flipped the script in terms of what it means to truly work together to serve the same individuals that we all do serve.
Austin?
Hi, I had a community engagement question as well. So I've been hearing that there's concern that historically there have been communities, school communities, or parts of town that have had more power and influence in the district, and there's kind of a concern that they'll be able to kind of throw their weight around and get things done, whereas more marginalized communities will not have that opportunity. So how can the district ensure that communities that historically have not been heard as well by the district will have their concerns heard and, have a seat at the table as well?
Well, I'll start off by saying I'll then turn it to Renee, because we're going to go out there directly to meet directly with our families, our students, our teachers, and throughout the Austin school system to make sure that it doesn't just come in the form of a report, but it does come in the things that we've already done, the community conversations, think tanks, the work with the Fab Pack, the different committees that we already have, but then also going directly to impacted communities to make sure that we're talking about the why, that we're talking about parents' dreams and aspirations. Actually, just yesterday, I had a meeting with parents, specifically with actually Trustee Letitia Anderson's, some of the parents that she wanted me to engage in a dialogue, specifically with them, to understand dreams, aspirations, and how the work we're going to do is going to best serve all of our kids. Renee, anything else to add on the engagement piece?
Yeah, we do have a robust engagement series planned, I think, unlike we have seen before. And part of that is utilizing different tools in order to hear voices that maybe are the voices that you have spoken of. And so even from the live polling tool that we used during the budget town halls, to the fact that we have invested with Let's Talk, and that is going to be able to take ideas that people have from all communities, and people have access at any hour of the day, as long as you have a mobile device, to put up your thought. And even if you put it up in Spanish, it auto-translates the thought into English so that people can vote, so that then you kind of marginalize the way everybody is viewing the thoughts, and what rises to the top are going to be the largest concerns of the community as a whole.
I would like to just add too, I hope that you can kind of look to some of our more recent work and how we are working with affected communities. And I'll just use the example of the old Anderson High School and the partnership that was really intentional and really personal relationship building with that group. And at least from the board's perspective, that is sort of our expectation that we have voiced for our superintendent as well.
And if I can add, the name of that tool is called Thought Exchange, and there is a thought exchange for every scenario that we have, that we've put out there, so that it's very individualized for folks to be able to comment on. Claire?
Austin, we could always do better in reaching out to marginalized communities, but I have to be honest, I don't know another school district that's investing so much in mental health centers than we are around marginalized communities. I don't know of another school district that's opening, how many schools, Dr. Cruz?
Seven.
Seven
in 1 year.
in 1 year. And I don't know of another school district that's spending $150 million in the most marginalized areas east of I-35 in new modernized schools. So from my perspective, marginalized communities are top of mind. And really, the question for the board, I believe, in the next 3 months is, what is our definition of equity? Dr. Cruz has one that's research-based, that I hope we talk about how we get nearer to that. But I think that's what school changes are all about. Making sure that every child has an opportunity to graduate college, career, and life ready. It's about the words we say and holding us accountable to those actions, because parents, I'll go back, my parents, other parents, they just want their kids to graduate ready for the world, for life, for career. And I can't think of a school district, or I have not seen a school district that puts marginalized populations, marginalized individuals top of mind. And again, we're not perfect, we can always do better. But I'm really proud to serve on this board representing the trustees, supporting the superintendent administration, and trying to make sure that we address the concerns of marginalized populations. Because I think that's an important obligation and responsibility for a school district, especially in our society. And now is the time to do it. Now's the time to do it.
I just want to add, and I welcome you, I welcome our community when we open up our brand new 21st century learning spaces, and they're learning spaces for our students at Go Valley, at Norman, at Eastside Memorial High School and International High School, at Menchaca, at T.A. Brown, with Red Primary. Those are real. I do think the people spoke, we listened, and here's a response to it. These schools, as you can see, the development are actually online, have a drone that you can access that, or actually the video for that, so you can see as the construction is coming up. The learning spaces are also very different. They're very different from when I went to in school 100 years ago, where I was in elementary school. They're supposed to be. They're individualized learning spaces, they're small group learning spaces, and classroom larger group learning spaces. But that's the intent. So it really is redesigning, reinventing teaching and learning across our sites.
Claire, like the shirt says, I'm glad to see you're still kicking.
I can tell you about it later. I was going to ask, what was your guys' definition of equity in this? Because all day I've been hearing very different things based on location. Some people are saying East Austin is bearing the brunt of closures and consolidations. Was it schools based on how many students live in poverty? So are we looking at location or makeup of the buildings? I've heard from a lot of people in East Austin that they understand why some of those schools need to close, but they feel when they zoomed out and looked at the big picture, their side of town is dealing with a lot of closures and consolidations, and then places in Northwest Austin, Southwest Austin are getting new programs and new things through the feeder patterns. So I'm curious, what was the definition of equity that led to this specific situation?
Well, I think what really drove us in our decision making, in addition to the data, right, was looking at how we can improve access and opportunity for our students in the programs. And that does include modernized spaces. It does mean that if we can concentrate resources by having a more healthy student body, you would have a music teacher and a PE teacher and a visual arts teacher in an elementary school, instead of having to go to maybe 3 elementary schools that might be kind of close and also under-resourced, and the facilities not nearly what they could be in a more modern building. Instead, just staying in that one school community because there's more students to serve, so they're not having to travel. What we know is that if we can address the equity issue by putting the very best teachers in front of our students every single day, and ensuring that students are engaged in lively learning experiences and getting to move and dance. And then again, another definition of a bullet of our equity definition is cultivating the gifts and talents of every student. And so if we can do that by realizing savings and investing in teachers, investing in resources, investing in modernized spaces, and investing in our students, then we are interrupting practices that have held students back.
And a follow, oh yeah, did you want to go?
And I'd also add that, as we're modernizing and rebuilding buildings, we're rebuilding trust. And we know that there's been some woefully unaddressed gaps in our schools on the east side, including the physical conditions. So that was something that we wanted to cure with this exercise, along with the academic strengthening that we've layered into this whole sort of comprehensive solution around this. But there's a data piece to it, right? I mean, most of the schools, when you look at just numbers of schools, are concentrated in those areas. So, of course, when you look proportionally, they're going to be more affected by some of these changes. When you have more schools, they're going to be more impacted. Whereas other districts across district-wide has less schools in those areas. And then we feel like we've casted a wide net. We've gone where we could, where there was opportunity. Certainly, we don't want to adversely affect students for the purposes of having equal treatment, because we know equal treatment doesn't necessarily mean equity, right? And so the equity lens was sort of, there was many different factors in consideration in terms of access and improving academic environment, improving physical environment, because we know that some of our kiddos in some of our low SES areas suffer from indoor air quality issues, just all the sort of health effects of being in subpar buildings. And so we wanted to strongly address that. I know that in my time in DC, when we've rebuilt schools, it's dramatically changed the learning experience. And many times I've heard people say, what was I fighting for? When you walk in and you see the brand new experience, when kids experience that, when they don't want to go home, right? That's what we want to recreate. And then you see people say, what was I fighting for? And so that was really a strong tenement. We wanted to improve academics. We didn't want to make kids worse off, and we wanted to improve the physical conditions and learning access.
And there were really a number of different factors, and each scenario is sort of a little bit different in terms of what were really the criteria that sort of allowed that one to leap to the top of the list. And so, one example may be when you're trying to expand hours that work better for single parents, parents with second shift jobs, grandparents raising kids. The fact that our after school program and the time that you're able to drop your child off in the morning was not really conducive, and we actually lost a number of families to charter schools specifically for that reason, that we were not competitive in that way. But when you have schools that only have, say, 100 kids or 150 kids, you can understand that lack of economies of scale makes it very challenging to offer a 6 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. robust before and after school care program. Another example has to do with professional learning communities for teachers. When you only have one teacher per grade level, you don't have that collaborative partnership between teachers that are all teaching the same groups of kids, and that development that works as well for the teachers as it does for kids. Or even in the example of a dual language model, where the best research shows that you have a cohort of native English speakers and native Spanish speakers, and some of the programs simply don't have that. And so while facilities were certainly a factor in many cases, because we have facilities that aren't just in poor shape, but that have significant site limitations or are unable to be modernized in the way that we've prioritized that as a district. And so it's really a combination of factors, and you'll see in the different scenarios that it's actually a wide variety. If it were simply just about the condition of the facilities or the under-enrolled schools, then we could have been done with this conversation 2 years ago as we wrapped up the facility master plan and the bond. But it's about so much more than that. It's about really focusing on the academic piece of that, because we can deal with the building and the drain that has on our resources, but if we can actually improve the way the academic model is delivered, the way we invest in our teachers to have those highest quality teachers in every single classroom, to eliminate that question of where are the good schools, it's really reinvesting in those ways that makes the biggest difference. The modernized spaces are great, but the other pieces have to be included in that as well.
And the reason I led off at the beginning to let you know that I had the fewest number of schools was a little bit to reinforce what Ms. Conley-Johnson just said. Even after all of this, I just encourage you to go look and count the number of schools in the district. The districts that seem to be feeling the most closures still are going to have more schools than any other place in town. So to her point, I mean, it's a ratio kind of situation, but also that's, those schools are close together, so you can still maintain neighborhood feels if there are consolidation.
Okay, we have gone a good 45 minutes plus, and I want to be able to allow time for Spanish to keep us at an hour. Be mindful of your time as well as ours. But before we go to Spanish, I would like to offer up some closing remarks from our superintendent.
Or do we want to go ahead and do the Spanish now? Podemos hablar español ahorita porque estamos todos aquí, ¿verdad? Porque si terminamos, todos se van y no tienen nadie aquí para platicar. Porque it's about equity, ¿verdad? And Spanglish,
here comes the mic.
right? It is about Spanglish too, ¿verdad? Pero ahí me entienden todo, ¿verdad?
Bueno, superintendente, prácticamente la mayoría obviamente de estas escuelas que se van a cerrar se encuentran al este de Austin. ¿Por qué se decidió esto? ¿De qué manera va a afectar positiva o negativamente a las familias hispanas, que son las de mayor necesidad económica, y también afroamericanas? Y también, ¿qué otras opciones tienen? Obviamente van a seguir contando con servicio de transporte si se llega a cambiar o modificar esta escuela con otras que se van a implementar, ¿es cierto?
Pues para empezar es por la oportunidad para todos los estudiantes. Hay una escuela que va a seguir, que es la Gus Garcia Young Men's Leadership Academy. Es una escuela que vamos a tener de grado 6 a grado 12 y va a continuar los estudios de justicia social, social justice. I may have invented that word, pero que van a seguir. Y es una escuela que va a ser para los estudiantes en grado 6 a 12. Eso va a seguir. También tenemos transportación para los estudiantes en esa área. Eso no va a cambiar. Lo que queremos hacer es mejorar las áreas académicas de todos los estudiantes que tenemos en este distrito escolar. Eso sí es muy importante porque sabemos que muchos estudiantes sí tienen calificaciones muy altas, pero tenemos que seguir en ese esfuerzo, ¿verdad? Que tenemos que seguir para mejorar las áreas académicas para todos nuestros estudiantes. Eso es muy importante y esto también es un cambio que va a pasar. Si no hacemos nada, ya tenemos las calificaciones, los datos, cómo va a pasar, pero es algo para cambiar. Pero también quiero decir que es algo que tenemos que hablar con los padres, las mamás, papás, la comunidad, abuelitas, abuelitos. Tenemos que hablar tocante de sus sueños. ¿Qué es lo que quieren para sus hijos y hijas? Y tenemos que platicar. Eso es muy importante. Eso va a seguir, no va a parar, porque es algo que tenemos que hacer para mejorar las áreas académicas para todos nuestros estudiantes.
Y una pregunta también, superintendente, ¿cómo se piensan
Hold
involucrar
on one
a las...
second. Did you have something to add there? No.
Para mí, la cuestión es de justicia para nuestros padres. Invirtiendo nuestros dólares en escuelas nuevas en el este de Austin es muy importante para padres como los míos y como los padres de nuestra comunidad. Ellos quieren lo mismo que cualquier otro barrio quiere en esta ciudad, que sus niños sean preparados para una carrera, para el colegio y para la vida. Y eso es lo más importante.
Y también nomás para las escuelas, como dijo el presidente Rodríguez, vamos a abrir las escuelas nuevas de Go Valley. Tenemos una opción para una nueva escuela, la Adobe, ¿verdad? También T.A. Brown, también una escuela Eastside Memorial High School, la escuela Sánchez, la escuela de International High School. Esas son escuelas para nuestros estudiantes y esas van a abrir en enero y unas también en agosto.
Y superintendente, habló de involucrar a la comunidad hispana. ¿Cómo lo piensan hacer? Porque hablando con algunos padres no están muy enterados y quizá no saben ni siquiera dónde están las oficinas donde pueden ellos venir y hablar. ¿Cómo piensan llegar a esa comunidad en español también con ellos?
Pues muchas gracias por la pregunta, porque vamos a estar en la comunidad. Esas juntas no van a estar aquí porque sí queremos que todas las familias estén involucradas en las áreas académicas de nuestros hijos. Yo como papá es muy importante de estar involucrado en las áreas académicas de mi hijo. Y no es diferente para las personas que viven en diferentes partes de Austin. Pero nosotros vamos a ir para para diferentes comunidades, a hablar con los padres, las mamás, papás, abuelitos, abuelitas, tía, tío, ¿verdad? En un idioma que ellos prefieren. So vamos a tener diferentes opciones también de que si prefieren en inglés o en español, porque es algo muy importante. Algo de estas pláticas no se pueden hacer solamente con audífonos, porque la información es muy importante y queremos que los padres, que las familias se sienten seguras que los vamos a oír y tenemos que platicar con ellos.
Bueno, de parte de la mesa directiva es muy importante oír la voz de nuestros padres, especialmente los que hablan otro idioma o sean de otros países, porque lo más que sus voces están oídas, porque yo creo nuestras familias tienen la responsabilidad, la obligación de hablar con nosotros de qué son los sueños que tienen, qué es lo que quieren de la escuela, y por eso parte es hablando con ustedes de la televisión o de los periódicos para comunicarnos, pero como dijo el doctor Cruz, vamos a ir a esas comunidades, pero también quiero decir que hay una responsabilidad, una obligación de nuestra comunidad de levantar nuestras voces para que otros no estén hablando por nosotros. Ya es tiempo que nosotros hablamos por nosotros mismos de qué es lo que queremos de una educación pública. Y eso lo pido de todos los padres y la comunidad.
We'll have a closing comment, but before that, I just want to thank you guys for being here. You're all going to be an important part and partner of this and helping get out communication that we need to and working with us in reaching the communities that we need to. Dr. Cruz?
Thanks, Renee. So just want to highlight, and then I'll turn this over to President Rodriguez. It is around access and opportunity for all of our students. It's going to look different. It's supposed to. It needs to be different because it's around equity for all of our students, making sure that we're serving our students in the best way for them. And it's also long-term. It's strategic. This is the time for the space, for dialogue, for conversation. Want what's better for our students, for Austin. We all do. It's never going to be perfect as a perfect plan, but we need to start somewhere. Once we have something, we can be responsive. We can modify it, we can change it. We have to keep in mind, though, it's around access and opportunity. And it's got to start with the academic intent on what's it going to do for the student. That has to be the laser focus on the work that we do.
First of all, thank you all for coming on a Friday afternoon. I want to first thank Dr. Cruz and the administration for all of their hard work that they've done in being intentional and thoughtful about bringing a proposal to the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees has scheduled 3 months, 3 different meetings where we will be hearing from the public, where we be talking about these issues. And frankly, the question I think that one of you all asked about the different definitions of equity is at the core of this. We all have different lived experiences. We all come from different parts of our community, but you know what? There's only one district, and that's Austin School District. And it's gonna be really important for the community to understand that this board has a responsibility and obligation as the duly elected body to make some final decisions, some difficult decisions. Because not only are we going to consider consolidations, consider closings, but we're also gonna consider repurposing and reimagining those spaces and what the community needs today, not what they needed in the past. And I think it's really important that we understand that this is part of the journey to getting us to a much better position than if it was just one person deciding or one individual trustee. So I think from my perspective, I really appreciate the hard work that the administration does. Now it's our responsibility, our obligation to discern this over the next couple of months. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you.